All back, no front room. You're listening to America's messiest podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, I pooped my pants. I pooped them.
I'm veteran of the mustard wars, Ben Sheets.
Hooby dooby, shooby dooby, gooby, reeby deeby, heeby. It's your boy, Cleveland Mosier, your favorite tongue-speaking boy.
Cleeby deeby.
Cleeby deeby. I'm speaking in tongues with my tongue.
Well, we're back with another new movie that has come and gone. MESS Mess. We're here to talk about The Front Rooms, the debut directorial feature from the Eggers brothers, the Not Roberts, Max and Sam.
Yeah.
Based on a short story by British author Susan Hill.
Who also wrote
The Woman in Black,
which is
yeah.
very popular.
I never read that, but I did see the Daniel Radcliffe movie. It was not very good.
Much like this.
Much like The Front Rooms. Yeah, holy shit, this was... What a fucking weird movie, man. This is going to be an interesting conversation, I think. We went and we saw this... last night. We had a private screening at Durham's historic Carolina Theater. Yeah. And you might be thinking, whoa, a private screening? How did we arrange that?
A lot of work.
Well, we didn't. It was a week after the film's release, it was the only theater still showing it. One showing at 9:20 p.m. and we were the only ones there. So we had the theater all to ourselves.
Just for us sickos, they ran that movie.
Yeah, they ran that just for us. We got our
support your local movie theaters, y'all.
But at least we were allowed to speak at full volume.
That was pretty sick. It is nice to have that every once in a while to laugh just really loud and just be kind of giggly and.
I mean, this movie is perfect for that, and I think this movie is perfect for having a couple drinks and seeing
oh my God,
which we had also done.
Yes.
I was
rowdy.
I was just drunk enough during this movie that it felt like a fever dream, and when I woke up this morning, I was kind of having to check my memory to see if some of the things that I remembered from this movie were real. It feels like kind of a hazy blur, but I don't know how much of that I can account to the alcohol and how much to the movie itself.
Oh, I can say I had a little less to drink, and I feel the same way. I think, and I think
so. It is the movie,
and I think it's by design. I think it's supposed to feel like a fever dream. It's you're supposed to feel watching this film like an exhausted mother who just gave birth, or is just about to, and all of the weird dreams and stuff that you get from that.
In fairness, tonally, I feel like there's some parallels between this and Mother, Aronofsky's Mother.
Yeah, interesting.
I haven't seen it.
Well, yeah, I think a big part of our conversation is going to be about intention versus result, because that's where I think most of my thoughts are around this movie. I think this is one of the most fascinating movies I've seen this year. Not a good movie. But really,
fun movie.
Yeah, it was fun in the moment. It left me feeling kind of hollow by the end, and we'll get into that. But okay, so set the stage a little bit. We mentioned this is a debut feature from Robert Eggers' brothers.
Yes, they wrote The Lighthouse.
Yeah, with Robert, I think. And this was produced and distributed by A24. I'm sure that was an easy nepo in. I think Eggers has done enough for A24 that it was probably pretty easy for him to say, hey, produce and distribute this movie my brothers want to make. Or, maybe A24 reached out to them. I don't know the politics of all of that, but this was an A24 film and was sort of advertised and marketed, the little bit of marketing that it got, as your sort of typical A24 elevated horror. The basic premise is a young married couple expecting a baby have to take in the husband's mother-in-law after his father dies. It was his father's last wish, and she offers to leave them all of her money. They're financially unstable, so they move the mother into the house, and the wife and the mother-in-law kind of clash. I think that watching the trailer for this movie, it's very sort of typical A24 trailer with the kind of weird off-kilter music and the snappy editing.
I think it's a bad trailer for what the movie actually is.
For what the movie actually is. Well, that's why I'm setting this up the way I am.
To me, the trailer reads as like a blend of Hereditary, Rosemary's Baby, and Get Out.
Yeah, very much so. And what I think the result is, and this is why I want to talk about intention versus effect, is that I think, whether intentional or not, what the Eggers brothers have done here is made a perfect parody of an A24 film.
Sure. And a very funny, dark comedy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, it's hard to say. It is very funny. This is a very funny movie. But that's another thing where I'm not 100% sure how much of that is intentional. I think the film is much more intentionally a comedy than the marketing played it out to be.
Yeah.
But I do think that a lot of the stuff that we were laughing at was maybe not the specific things that we were supposed to be laughing at.
No, surely it was. I think it absolutely was.
Yeah.
I think that, the intent behind, from the jump with this film was comedy. It's so slapstick. It's so over the top and cartoonish. Kathryn Hunter, is that her name?
Yes.
Her performance in particular is so zany that
her performance is transcendent. It is what
incredible.
It is what
truly
makes this. It is what makes this movie worth watching at all. I think you lose. Yes. I think you lose her and her performance from this movie, and you have nothing.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's 80% of the film, and it's essentially this film is it almost becomes like a creature feature where she's the creature, right? Or a fucking Muppet movie and she's the Muppets, and the other characters are just like the side humans that prop up the Muppets and prop up the plot. But she's we're all there for Kermit the Frog. We're all there for Gonzo, you know? And
sure.
she's that in this film. Another way to think of it is like a fighting movie, like a kung fu film, where 20% of it is just plot to get us to the next kung fu, the amazing kung fu sequence. Mm-hmm. I felt like 20% of this movie was just plot to get us to the next insane granny bit. Much like kung fu movies, I'm okay with that. It's not great. All of my critiques are to do with that 20%, are to do with the everything else around this film. But the granny stuff, that's where chef's kiss. I can only applaud.
That's where most of my complaints come from as well. But I do think that, especially by the end of the film, what the ideas that they actually had for what to do with this character and this performance, I think ran pretty thin, and they just relied upon repetition of the same shtick over and over again. And Kathryn Hunter is good enough that you get way more mileage out of that than you would otherwise, I think. But especially by the conclusion of the film and the conclusion of the plot, I was just kind of like, that's it? Granny fucking hobbles around the house shitting herself for 100 minutes, and it's that kind of is what the movie really boils down to. It's not what it sets itself up as.
It's really funny. I think that's the thing. Boiling it down kind of does a disservice again to Kathryn Hunter's performance. There's such physicality in the performance, the way she mean mugs Brandy throughout the film and gives her the weird Muppet smile all the time.
Right, but it's funny, but that doesn't discount my point that they just do the same thing over and over again. That's what I'm saying. The mean mugging thing is something that she does constantly, and it's funny
every time. But
at a certain point they run out of fresh and new things to do. It's just her shitting the bed and being, help me, M-E-double-S mess. And then the husband picks her up and over his shoulder she gives a nasty little grin, and like it's funny for a quick laugh, but then it's like, okay, I'm ready to see something else, and then they just do it again.
Well, see, I think there's enough variation in the abrasiveness. She has so many more ways of terrorizing, particularly Brandy in this movie, between the whistle that she gets later on.
The whistle is funny gag.
The way that she tries to separate the two of them, like, she tries to sow, disillusion between them, and in discord, and like bringing in the other people and like designing the whole house, and like she's taking every means that this frail old bat can take to torture her. And I think so much of the issues that I see you having with the movie, and this is a guess, like to if I can kind of understand like where you're coming from this, because actually I don't like necessarily agree with this. I do have my own gripes with the film, but like it's not necessarily the same gripe. You were expecting the film to be like cosmic, right? Or to be like there to be like a supernatural element where, she summons something or whatever. Like the trailer sets us up to think that, and there's visions throughout the film.
And multiple times in the film they set us up for some kind of climax or payoff at the end. Like they do multiple things in the film to establish that Solange, the grandmother, has some kind of like weird supernatural ability. Like she seems to be like, she knows that Brandy's pregnant with a girl just by touching her, and she knows that they had a child beforehand that was stillborn, that was a boy, and like even midway through the movie they have a scene where she's like praying, and she seems to, at least the way the film suggests, is like she seems to induce Belinda's labor through her like weird like prayer or whatever. And there's all these kinds of hints to some kind of like supernatural other of her faith. Like she's hyper religious, but she keeps talking about how I'm not allowed to practice my faith the way I used to. And there's these references to the mother, but it seems to have some other implication other than just like Mary, the mother of Christ, That's why I'm saying it feels like a parody of an A24 film, because it's setting itself up like Hereditary, and then by the end there isn't really a supernatural or otherworldly threat. The grandma is just nasty and racist and poops a lot.
Well,
most of the drama in the film is around poop, which is funny, and that's why it feels like a joke to me. This feels like the A24 version of Freddy Got Fingered. And that's why I would love to know what is intent and what is not, because I think that if the Eggers brothers went out to try to make like their own Freddy Got Fingered, where they get a bunch of money from A24 and set it up as like this prestige elevated horror film, and then just make it about a mean old racist lady who shits all over the house, like that's a pretty funny bit. But it did kind of like leave me feeling sort of hollow by the end of it. Like as much as I laughed throughout, I came away from it feeling like, what was the point of any of this? See, like where was this? What was it trying to say?
The supernatural element isn't the only part that feels a little underbaked, I guess.
Not at all,
because like I think the husband at one point says that Solange believes like she's a vessel for the Holy Spirit,
right?
And like,
and the Holy Spirit gives her power.
Yeah, there's a lot of implications there within the spiritual kind of visions that are had. But in addition to that, it's also like heavily referenced that she's racist.
She's a certificate. She's an old certificate of membership of the Daughters of the Confederacy.
It's like a neo-racist organization. And they really don't do a ton with the racism angle, ultimately. I feel like they could have done much more.
That's an interesting question, too, because it's like so many other movies have done that kind of thing. And you mentioned Get Out as well, which is like a big point of reference for that. And it's like, I don't know what more I would have wanted to see in terms of depiction of old Southern racism in this that I haven't seen in other movies. But at the same time, I agree with you that, like, if you're going to make a point of setting it up and then not really do much with it, it's like the racism thing is, like, obviously the main, like, underlying tension throughout the movie, but it's more so the kind of, like, old institutionalized racism of, you know, just kind of, like, looking down on other people without it being, like, overt. And again, I don't know how much I don't know if I need it, but
if you're going to include it, you can go much further in it. You know, I feel like it's underbaked here. I was expecting, like, her to be super weird about a biracial baby and whether the baby is going to be dark-skinned or white enough or, you know, trying to bleach the baby or whatever. And we don't get that. And that's fine, you know.
I actually like that we didn't get that, personally. I think that this, in some ways, as cartoonish as she is, it almost depicts to me, like, more realistic and lifelike depiction of, like, an old racist bat. So often, like, in my experience with, like, folksy racism and, like, racist old people, like, it's such a mixed bag, and it's so all over the place, because racism is inherently, like, messy and weird and illogical.
M-E-double-S mess!
And so, like, throughout my life, I have been constantly surprised by old people who will, like, say something that is almost, like, weirdly progressive for the era because, like, they were young women in the 30s, you know? And then all of a sudden, like, flip around and just say the most racist or sexist shit you've ever heard. Because they're also part of, like, those same institutions.
This movie is pure camp, though. Like, this is not the place for restraint.
Yeah, I
think that's the problem, and I agree, and like that I don't disagree with. Like, but the only thing, like, and again, my only point there is just that, like, the fact that she wasn't, like, I mean, I don't know, like the.
See, I get what you're saying in that it feels like a more realistic depiction of old people racism, but the character otherwise is a pure caricature.
Well, and I'll explain,
she's
like,
a cartoon.
Why I think that is, and why, like, the core conceit and structure of this movie, to me, rocks. Like, and I really like it. My problem is very specifically in the in some small elements of execution with the husband and wife. But the idea of this film, to me, is rad. And it's that, hey, guess what? The marketing, all wrong. I wish that it hadn't been marketed this way, for sure. But, like, ignore all that idea of, like, there being a conspiracy, there being a plot.
Imagine someone going in blind.
Imagine going in blind. And the conceit of this film is, like, we are a mother who is, because we're all seeing this through Brandy's eyes. Like, this is from her perspective, this entire film. And she is an unreliable narrator because she is going through pregnancy and she's being worked to the bone. So whenever, like, something surreal is happening, it's elevated life. It's an exaggeration of what she's perceiving. Like, in the same way that, like, fucking Eraserhead is an allegory for the anxiety of parenthood, right? Like, it's the same here. We're seeing her greatest fears realized. Her husband having to constantly leave because he's pursuing his career, you know, like, basically just turning her into, like, a house slave in her own home, where she also has a career that she desires, you know, and, like, has this life that she wants to live, but because, like, she's the lady giving birth, she's the one who's having to deal with all this stuff. And they never say it outright, but, like, you know, there's those circumstances. And now, suddenly, she has to be a caregiver for this old woman as well. The husband is hardly helping, to the point where she's almost been suffocated by this mother by the end. And she has visions and fears about that as well. That is the idea. The problem, to me, is that I did not find Brandy to be a very likable protagonist. Her performance is so dry, and she makes several decisions throughout the film out of character, which makes it very difficult for me to pinpoint who she is as a person. There are times in this film, like, there'll be a scene where the husband and wife, the husband feels like the granny should be allowed to do something, and the wife feels like she shouldn't, and then the next scene, they've flipped. And suddenly, it's the other way around. And this happens throughout the film, and it leaves these characters feeling so wishy-washy in their own constitution. Like,
it's totally inconsistent.
Like, and it starts inconsistent too. Like, and I think that's what hurts the film the most, to me, is that the husband, we learn about this character through a very ominous phone call where she calls the boy. She's like, "You there?" You know, like, and it's all like, "It's your mother," you know, and it's all spooky and shit. And he just drops the phone, and he is paralyzed with fear.
Yeah.
To speak with her, and then he tells her that when he was, this is all we get. This is all the backstory we get for her at the beginning. Is when he was a boy, she starved him until she earnestly believed that he loved Jesus when he's saying, "Jesus loves me." Like, she tortured him as a child, is what he tells her. And then in the next scene, or when she is introduced, the wife is the one who is like, "Oh yeah, no, let's bring her in."
Well, additionally, like, in that introduction, he also expresses, like, the reason he hasn't introduced her is, like, she's racist. You know, from the jump, she's...
He says, I don't think that she would approve of our relationship. Yeah, so there's a history, a hinted at history of childhood religious abuse, and we also know that this character is racist. And to double back a little bit, like, to all the stuff that you're saying, like, what the movie is quote-unquote about, I largely agree with you. I think it's the problem is the matter of tone, because like Ben said, this Solange character isn't really a character. She's a caricature. She's a cartoon. Again, though, Catherine Hunter's performance, fantastic. Like, really, really elevates this film into being anything worth watching as far as I'm concerned. So I wouldn't want her to tone it down, but I think if you're going to try to seriously make a movie that is ultimately about, you know, an elderly woman who is close to death and fears that and is, trying to do anything she can to feel like she still has a sense of control, but that she's ultimately impotent and fragile and weak, and to sort of hide this behind like a veneer of the supernatural. It's like, if that's what you're trying to do, then you can't tell that story like a Looney Tunes cartoon. I'm not going to take it seriously. Like, if you're trying to tell an earnest story, then you have to make me take it seriously in some way. And it's impossible to take this movie seriously.
I think trying to tell the story in earnest would be such a fucking downer. That's not what I wanted.
It would be an entirely different film, and that's why I'm saying that I think they should. I'm agreeing with you, Ben, that they should lean in to making it more exploitation-y, more out there, like push on that stuff. Give me a crazy wild finale where grandma channels some kind of like evil holy spirit and is like flying around the house like shooting lasers out of her eyes or something.
And I mean,
it's like give me that shit.
Even if you want to keep that aspect grounded and keep the supernatural to Belinda's imagination, like, you can still escalate the stakes further than they did a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like Belinda in this movie was such a passive character that these things were all happening to her and she was just experiencing them, and she really doesn't have much of any pop-off moments.
Agency. Yeah.
You know, she has that one moment where, you know, Solange, in her accent, keeps calling her Belinda.
Yeah.
Rather than Belinda. And this is in the trailer, even.
Yeah.
And she, you know, corrects her, yelling, "Belinda!"
Yeah, my name's Belinda. Yeah. Belinda, like, while Solange is, like, lying feebly on the floor, she's falling over, like, "Oh, help me."
Yeah.
Help me, Belinda.
And I think more of that push and pull between the two would make it feel way more dynamic.
I think at a certain point there needs to be an escalation of stakes as well, in that same kind of vein, because at a certain point I stopped worrying for these characters, which I think is bad for a horror movie. Like, I feel like you should be afraid for them, and at a certain point I stopped feeling like Solange was like a threat, and realized that more she was just kind of an annoyance.
See, and they have on paper like the opportunities to escalate tension and threat in this movie with the baby. You know,
right, exactly.
born.
Once the baby's
born,
we
even get that, you know, very Rosemary's Baby-esque scene where Solange has invited a bunch of her friends over to the house.
Yeah, her weird little cult over.
Yeah.
That was another moment. I was like, okay, it feels like it's kind of an escalation of the tension and stakes. And that scene is kind of like creepy where they all like lay hands on Belinda and the baby and they're all like speaking in tongues. Like it's kind of unsettling and like Belinda freaks out or whatever. But after that scene, we never see those people again.
Yeah, and I mean on top of that we get, elements after that of it seems like the baby likes Solange more than Belinda, and there's some natural tension there. But
Sure.
I think again,
it feels like Solange is like pushing Belinda out, but
they could have pushed that so much further, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest aspect of this, where I do agree, is that they don't resolve the other people.
Yeah.
Like that those people like they introduce them in one of the best scenes of the film and then we never see them again. Like
Yeah, and
even after Solange dies, where I feel like I would have loved some closure with them, with Belinda getting to finally say what she fucking feels to those people now that she's essentially free. And like they show up and be like, "Hey, do you need anything?" And she can be like, "Fuck off." That'd be great. I would love that. But no, they're just sort of like they just disappear after that. And to me, like that's all I needed. I needed like a bit of just any kind of resolve, and realism would have been fine. Like again, them showing up and her telling them to fuck off. That's all I needed in that respect. Beyond again, like Belinda's character being a little bit more consistent. The ways in which she has tried to assume agency, kind of just making her feel a little bit more like capable and trapped. It would have, I think, reinforced that. A good example is like Hush, for instance, where like the protagonist is deaf and like she's still really capable. But because she's so capable and she's making all the right moves, she feels even more, it seems like she's even more trapped. Mm-hmm. Like something along those lines where like we still reinforce that like, yes, all of her agency has been stripped away. I would like to have seen her still claw at the box a little bit more like creatively, I think.
Well, and again, Brandy's performance as Belinda is so kind of flat that, like,
she's not a good foil.
Belinda, for a movie like this, like I feel like I need to really feel like she's losing her mind.
She needs
right?
more pop off moments.
Yeah,
like
she needs more pop off. You need to feel like she's really at her wit's end. You need to feel like her sanity is at a breaking point. Like especially if you're not going to follow through on the sort of like hints at the supernatural. Like again, if you're not trying to make that kind of movie, that's fine, but there does need to be some kind of tension. And if you're not doing a supernatural horror film and you're doing a psychological horror film, which this movie is technically, like I need to feel the fraying psyche of my protagonist. Like I need to feel like Belinda's going to snap. Like she technically does snap at the end of this, but even that feels kind of toothless. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it doesn't
feels a little abrupt in the film.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I don't feel, other than the movie telling me that she's at this breaking point, I don't feel the breaking point.
Yeah, well, we get,
and maybe it's because I'm too busy laughing at Solange.
We get that scene before the finale where she's in her car and the Solange's chair is in front of the car, alongside of some other memorabilia, as well as the father's ashes for some reason. I don't know why she would want to run over.
Well, because Solange used the ashes to replace like her career, like on the mantle and shit, and so like Solange still, even weaponized that. But yes, I agree. Like it is kind of weird that she would want to run it over.
and then she seems like she's gonna run it over, but she doesn't.
Yeah, they do the thing where it's like she rams into it, runs it over, and then it snaps back. It's like, oh, it was just a fantasy that she had of doing it. Yeah, again, it's like I didn't really like feel that, like in her character. Which is
well, because she's just in the scene doing the thing, like there's not bringing a great deal of like drama and gravitas to the scene, like to my memory of it. Like she just does the thing in the scene. To go back to my Muppet reference, like at a guess, like who do y'all think my favorite Muppet is?
Swedish Chef.
Okay, great choice. No, it's Tim Curry. he works so well in that movie because he's an amazing foil to the Muppets. He himself basically becomes a Muppet to bounce the Muppet energy off of, right? So that they play off of each other so well. And like all of the best human actors in Muppet films do this. Like they amplify. And here, like Solange, again, like she's just this human Muppet. She's so larger than life and crazy. And I feel like it doesn't bounce off so much as just stick to Brandy.
It's one-way traffic. I totally agree, but I will say, as a counterpoint, like, when you have a high camp character like this that's so over the top, part of the reason it's so funny is because you pair it with a straight man.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Brandy is a straight man in this movie, and honestly, she's the only actual other character in this movie. Like, you have the husband, but he is mostly absent.
Yeah.
And his character is so one-dimensional.
Well, he's in the dynamic of this film, he's the one who should be the straight man to balance Solange, because Brandy, as our protagonist, as our lens, the one who is being acted upon, again, she can't really be the straight man because she needs to go mad, basically, you know? So the counterbalance to that is for the husband to be, but he's not really anything.
He's mostly absent. Again, he's constantly
and that's
leaving.
that's partially
the absence is fine, but when he's there,
intent,
he needs to, feel a little bit more like.
Well, I think it's a structural problem because, again, like Tease was saying, like, you want Belinda to be the lens of the film, but if those are the only two characters, because any tertiary characters are absent, she also has to play the straight man, and the combination of both of those doesn't really work.
It's tricky too, because the commentary with the husband is probably some of my favorite about the film. Like, I love that he's sort of like kind of a baby man. You know, he just uses his job to escape, like, and without his realization, he's making her into like just this house worker, in her own home. And I don't know, I found that to be like, I really like, I found that to be powerful. But again, on paper. Like, I think his performance
did have him in more of the movie.
Yes, and when he's the problem really to me is that when he's there, he's once again like being inconsistent. He's making calls that contradict what he was previously going with. And when he and Brandy both do this, it makes her snap feel less ratcheted. Like if she is accepting at first and then slowly becomes less on board with these things, like, it makes sense. But at the beginning, she the first interaction with this situation, she's accepting, and then she's immediately not, and then she is again, and then she isn't, and like it doesn't feel like it escalates.
And the husband and the husband,
the situations escalate.
The husband is too, which I think is even more of a problem than with Belinda, because Belinda doesn't know this person. She doesn't know Solange. Her husband has not told her anything about her because obviously he has all of this past trauma around his relationship with his stepmother. So it would make sense that Brandy or that Belinda would, want to try to make the best of the situation and, like, bridge the rift between her husband and her mother-in-law for the sake of their family and the baby. So it makes sense that at the beginning, she's the one who's trying to give, like, Solange the benefit of the doubt and recognize that this is an old woman who's in the final years of her life and she needs somebody to take care of her, and we're her family, so we should step in and fill that void. It's like, this makes sense. The husband's resistance makes sense, and the husband's resistance should be consistent. Yeah. The problem is that when Belinda flips, anytime that she flips on Solange and recognizes that she's racist or that she's manipulative or so on and so forth, 90% of the time in those moments, the husband is inexplicably on Solange's side.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, I don't get that.
It's not all the time. Like, sometimes he does, like, back up Belinda.
But it's more than once, and it's frustrating each time. She was the one who.
It's like, dude, you didn't want this in the first place. Like, you're doing this to kind of placate your wife. Like, you have all of this baggage around your mother. Like, why does he randomly defend her?
The only reasoning I can find for it, like, and I don't like this answer, and I don't agree with this answer, but like logic, because it speaks to it logically, but it doesn't speak to it emotionally, is that like his career is suddenly about to get off, and if he can just make this last a little bit longer, you know, and like if he can get through this situation, have like this financial nest egg that he's going to get from taking care of Solange, then he can get his career started.
Sure.
And he's being led along by his career throughout the film, and that's always his reason.
Yeah, if there's more reluctance, like, we have to make this work because we need her money. Like, if that was...
I think often said and not shown, though. Like, you never, like, see... I mean, it's hard to say.
That is a huge problem.
The paint bucket thing, like, there's that where she's like, she couldn't afford the paint, but...
That's it. That's a problem, is that you never feel their financial stress like you do. I mean, plenty of movies like this, plenty of horror movies specifically, you know, the characters are motivated by financial instability. But I think you have to do something to allow the audience to feel that, to get a sense of how dire things are for these characters. And we never see any of that in this movie. Like, Belinda loses her job, like she quits her professor job. But like, other than that, they've got this pretty nice house. They say the furniture is outdated. Can't really tell.
Bro, I would kill to live in the house the way it does at the beginning. Yeah,
it's like they've got a pretty nice house, and it's like the only reason that we know they're financially unstable is the scene that you mentioned where Belinda comes home and says to her husband, "I was just at the hardware store and the card got declined when I was trying to buy a bucket of paint. Man, it was so embarrassing." That is it. And immediately after that, it's like in the same scene, he gets the call, is like, "Oh, my dad's dead," and then, okay, now we gotta go. Mm-hmm. It's like it's almost like they threw in that line just so in the next scene when we are introduced to Solange and she offers them her money, that they're like, "Oh yes, we need that."
Yeah. Well, and it's such a ripe opportunity to play off financial stress, because having a baby is a very financially taxing event.
100%.
You know? Like, even if they're not struggling in the moment at the beginning of the film, like, they're about to be very much more tight on money. Yeah. And they could play that up a little bit. They don't.
Yeah. So, and I think at the end of the day, this is the biggest problem this film has across the board, and that's set up to pay off.
Yes.
Financially. Set up to pay off. Again, I can't afford a can of paint. Doesn't speak to their lifestyle, you know? It's a very, like, kind of just literal way to say it.
Yeah, it's like, we do not have money to buy things.
Yeah, and, like, that's cool. It's a fine start.
It's like, I was at the store.
It's good because it ties into the nursery. That's fine. But, like, I need to see how shitty their car is. I need to see, like, how... And, like, their car is fine. Their house needs to feel way more rundown and shitty than it does. Like, the water needs to, like, not work one night, and the husband needs to fucking figure something out. Like, there needs to be stuff like that. Like, real, like, earnest texture. Because, frankly, like, me as, like, someone into my 30s, like, living in this economy, like, is still, frankly, kind of, like, almost jealous of, like, their current lifestyle.
Yeah, they own a house.
When they start, you know? Yeah, they own a house. Come on, guys. Like, and there's that set up to pay off. The other one is the love between the husband and wife. The setup to pay off here. And what kills me is the payoff is good. Like, is great even. I really like how for me, with the husband and, like, the whole baby thing, and, like, we get that bit of him, like, suckling on her old lady teat in the vision. I loved all that stuff. I thought it was excellent. Like, yeah, like, he's essentially been made this, like, weird baby, and she's usurped this mother role. And it's gross and fucked up, and, like, it made me feel her discomfort with her, even in spite of, like, her character. And, like, I thought that was fine. The problem is that, like, I never felt any love between them from the beginning.
No, not really.
Like, he is introduced as, like, a jump scare. Like, he, like, knocks on the window of her car, and he talks to her from outside. And, like, Dude, why? Okay, look. You're introducing like this husband and wife. They have a baby on the way. They've got their home. Times are hard, but they're getting through it regardless, right? Like, you really need to show that something between these two people is whole before the grandmother comes in and fucks it all up and rips it all away.
Yeah,
right,
for sure.
And it's like cool. You have their distress. They have financial woes. Cool. The grandmother can come in and solve that, but at the cost of their love. And also, too, it's essentially like a survival horror film. And one of the horrors that she experiences is that her husband isn't the bedrock that she thought he was. But we never see him be the bedrock.
Right.
You know? And he's they're supposed to support each other like a good couple would do. And then she realizes, no, I'm being made to deal with all this shit myself. I have to figure this out on my own. My husband is worthless. And, like, playing up the husband being worthless is funny and fun and even uncomfortable. Like, and there's some great themes and ideas there that I really like. But I feel like you need to build to that. And they don't start with that at all. They start, to me, the exact opposite way around. Like, there's a coldness between them. The movie feels like fairly desaturated and dire and A24, like, from the beginning. And so, like, these two never share that warmth. A great example is, to quote, or to reference another A24 film that I know we didn't necessarily enjoy the marketing of either, Lamb. Boy, do we love that Lamb. Boy, how do we love the Lamb in Lamb. And when it's taken away, it hurts. You know, like the film or not, I think you guys would agree, right?
Yeah.
This movie, I can't give it that.
You wanted the husband to be like the lamb.
Yeah.
In Lamb.
He's not even a character.
Put him in a cute
movie.
sweater.
He's not even a character in this movie. He's so one-dimensional white bread, like, flat. There's no personality there. There's no flavor.
I think that something we haven't really touched on that I think is a big culprit of all of this is I think the dialogue is quite bad in this movie. It's very awkward. I think you could even say at times Shyamalan-esque, but somehow without Shyamalan's charm.
I think with the exception of Solange.
But it's a performance thing more than anything else. And a lot of Solange's stuff isn't dialogue, it's monologue, right? Like, I think she gets some opportunities to ham it up, but when two characters, what's supposed to be two people, are speaking to each other, like Norman and Belinda, it's like they talk to each other like aliens, like aliens trying to figure out how people are supposed to talk to each other. And I think that does a lot to hurt any sense of tenderness.
Well, yeah, and the straight man point
between them,
from earlier, like a straight man or an everyman is a funny foil because he's you. You know, like he's the viewer, and like the straight man isn't the dry man. It's not the cold man. It's not like the boring man. Like, that's not what a straight man is. A straight man is
I want the wet
is
man.
The person who goes, what the fuck, when weird shit happens, right? Like, it's the person who responds to the weird shit in a normal way.
Yeah.
And the husband does not do that. And like, it's cool if he doesn't by the end. Like, if he becomes something else. Like, that's scary and cool. Like, I'm here for that. But we got to start there. We got to start with them being on the same page. They're a couple. They're strong, and just that
they have to feel united in order for them to be torn apart.
Yeah, and like they do all the tear apart shit, but like,
but I don't ever really feel like they're torn apart. Nope. Also, because by the end they come together over like with very little effort.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
You know, it's absolutely. Like all it really takes, and you know, we can get into this now, and then circle back a little later, talk more about Solange in general, just because I think we should talk about the good part of the movie.
Absolutely,
but
I have plenty to say there.
So like what brings them back together and what is like ultimately the climax of the film, where like Solange has been quote unquote like tearing them apart or whatever by like fraying Belinda's psyche because she's constantly shitting and pissing on everything, is like at the end they find a bite mark on the baby's arm, and originally the husband accuses Belinda of it for some reason. Oh, because it was upstairs and Solange can't get up the stairs with her canes, right? But then Belinda's like, look at the bite mark. It has a tooth missing, just like Solange.
Says.
Yeah, says.
Doesn't show. I want to make a point of that.
Yeah, we see
it before, but it's like kind of loose and like kind of quick.
You can't really tell.
It's baby makeup. I get it. But
you can't really tell, and they don't cut back to it. But yeah, it's like, look,
there's a close up.
She's like, look, there's a tooth missing on the bite mark, so it had to be Solange. And he's immediately just like, oh yeah. And then they go downstairs, and he's like,
them united.
And he's like, Solange, you have to leave. And so she lies in bed for the rest of the night, going, why can't I die? Why can't I die? And then she dies.
Yep.
And it's like, that's all it takes to really bring them back together. And then we get a kind of like epilogue, I guess, where we circle back and we see that Brandy finally did snap and she smothered Solange.
Well, the key point there is the pastor of the church comes over and inadvertently reveals that Solange has already paid off the house.
Yes.
And everything. Mm-hmm. The potential of money isn't being held over their head anymore. It's already been paid for.
Right. And it's like, well, and as soon as she's already named them in her will, so once she's gone, they get all their money anyway, and it's like, then that conflict is resolved. They have a nicer house, she's pregnant again, whatever, and then we see the flashback of her smothering Solange and like that being that.
I think it would have been really funny if we got some subverted attempts of Belinda trying to kill Solange.
Yeah,
and it
sure.
became sort of an escalating series of
that would
at
least be funny and feel a little bit more like a kind of climax, because it's like when Solange dies, like I was kind of like, okay, we're getting to the end of this film, but there's going to be something, right? Like I was still kind of like holding out for some kind of like supernatural reveal. I was kind of expecting it to be something like, okay, once Solange dies, through some weird magic, she's able to like transfer her spirit.
Something with vessels.
She transfers her spirit into the body of the baby, because like after Solange dies, like immediately after that, the baby like latches to Belinda for the first time. Like that's been a whole thing throughout the movies, that the baby will only drink from a bottle, will not breastfeed, and as soon as Solange is dead, then the baby immediately latches. So I kind of thought it's like, oh, she's dead, so her spirit has transferred into the baby, and while Belinda was spending all of this time like caring for this incontinent elder who's pissing and shitting all over the place, you know, like a baby, now the Solange has transferred her spirit into the body of the baby. Ooh, isn't that spooky and creepy or whatever? And now she can go back to terrorizing them. But no, like their financial problems are solved. We get the flashback that she killed her, and it's like that's really just kind of it.
I mean, I will say, like, I do think it's a funny bit of, you know, them going downstairs and she's dead, and it hard cuts to her in the furnace. You know,
that was hilarious.
Set to the song "No Regrets," and then Belinda, we get a sequence where she's singing "No Regrets."
Yeah,
which is very funny.
Yeah,
you know, that's a very funny bit. It's abrupt, but it
yeah, and I feel like if
it's a punchline, it's not a climax.
Well, I think if Belinda's character,
in a dark comedy, we're looking for lots of punchlines.
Yeah, and if I agree, and like I think it would have paid off even better if like Belinda's character had been more consistent leading up to that point, and then her snap had been bigger. Like because I agree. I think that I can kind of imagine like if I really loved this character, like man wanting to fucking sing along with her in the car, you know, and just being like, yeah, no fucking regrets. That old bat is dead. Fuck yeah. Even still, I feel that a little bit. Like it's funny. But that could have. I just think it would have felt a little. It would have just been kind of brought across the line a little bit further if she had just been a little bit more consistent from the beginning. And you know, again, and the husband as well, and they just had a few more opportunities to like be themselves and to be characters before they were brought into this whole situation.
Yeah. And I mean, like,
and they mended their relationship, no problem.
Yeah.
But like frankly, the movie before Belinda before Solange shows up, is pretty boring.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Like, the first 15, 20 minutes of this movie, I was like, oh god, what have we gotten ourselves into? Like, it feels like very straight to streaming, you know, run-of-the-mill stuff. And then Solange is introduced, and it becomes a hilarious romp for a good amount of the runtime. And I think, again, like, we've talked about a lot of the problems. I think we should dig into Solange, because I think that's what takes this otherwise kind of bad movie and makes it fun.
It's what makes it watchable at all.
My thought process during her introductory scene.
Sure.
Like, so the father dies. They're finally introduced to this Solange person who's sort of been made a phantom. During the sermon, she's in a full black hood, so we can't see her face.
Veil.
Yeah, a veil, and she looks very spooky and silhouetted and all dark with little to no facial features, like the shadow creature.
And she has her double canes,
yeah,
almost looking like a mantis.
She
looks like an insect, like a spider or something. I think it's
more on that.
Genuinely kind of spooky.
So yeah, they go to the reception and they say, "Oh yeah, hi Solange," and she turns around. And again, still the black veil and these two canes, where she's up, she walks like the tripods from War of the Worlds, you know, or some shit like that. And it's like the Foley is so overblown. Every thump of her cane
so
is like,
funny.
It's like an explosion, and it's just like douche, douche.
That's one of the things I like that is consistent throughout the movie.
Great.
Is
and the timing
the sound
is amazing.
the sound of her canes is just deafening. The entire movie.
Like it's so hyperbolic and cartoonish, and I loved it. Like, but I
liked that a lot.
My thought was like because again, it's so over the top in this very like cold, shitty church, and all of a sudden like this thunderous like fucking creature appears, and I found myself laughing, and again like immediately I was like, my first thought was, is this by design? Like, because it's funny, it's not scary. Like, she's just an old lady, and then she removes her hood and she starts speaking almost jargon. Like, you can't understand her. She's so like old and southern and weird. We all just burst into laughter at that point, and like there's just an immediate realization that for me, where I was just like, oh no, this is great. They're hamming into it. Let's fucking go, more of her, please. And then so much of the rest of the movie is just her being insane and clomping around the house like Godzilla. Just this larger than life, very tiny old lady who just pees and poops everywhere. And I loved it. I loved so much of her. And I think this movie did a very rare and very, like, to me, relatable and very believable version of folksy racism, right? Like, and I is cartoony and as insane as she is. I gotta be real with you guys. Like, I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast before. I think I have. I'll keep it short. But like, when I was in high school, I went to a youth camp that took a bus into the middle of like central Alabama, like Bible Belt, at this camp where they locked the doors and they all spoke in tongues and shit. And I've seen people do this shit before, and they fucking nailed it. Like, and not only like the way that they speak and all of the rest of it, but the feeling that comes with it. Because I remember, like, when I was surrounded by people speaking in tongues in my own experience, like, thinking, this is demonic. Like, this shit is, like, if they are trying to, like, summon the light of something, it's Satan. You know, like, this is insane. And two, kind of funny, right? Like, it's a bunch of people going around, oobly goobly deebly doo. You know, it's like, it's the dumbest shit in the world, right? And it's people just trying to, you know, do magic. And, in a framing that they feel they're allowed to do. And I loved every bit of that kind of stuff. And in particular, too, people like that, I remember a lot when I was at that church camp, the framing around Christianity was always, like, being the Lord's soldier, being responsible for making sure that this ancient art doesn't die. that Christians are persecuted every day. There are less and less Christians, and that you need to carry the light of the Lord. You know, like there's so much of that like victim dialogue in that and that persecution, and I love how Solange gets into that. I love whenever she talks about how like you know, like people she's not accepted anymore, and that she uses her Christianity as like this like false persecution to relate to Belinda's blackness, and to be like, no, you don't get it. I'm a Christian. I'm persecuted too. Bro, that is so funny to me. Like, and I found that to be, again, for as much of like a Muppet as she is, like very believable and very accurate to my own experiences with Christians like that. So I personally, I really liked all of that stuff. And I also really liked that that's all that there was. What I didn't like is how that was paid off. Again, I liked that element on paper.
Oh, you mean how it wasn't paid off? Most other things.
Well, I mean, like on paper, she strangles her to death, and she drives off triumphantly, singing "No Regrets." Like, to me, that's climax. Like, it has like all of the beats that lead to that point. Solange, in her attempts to also grab agency, because they're essentially like grabbing at each other for agency, like that's their conflict between the two of them, right? Is that Belinda is clawing at agency and becoming like a caretaker and a nurse and a mother and a servant in her own home, and Solange is losing the agency of living. Like, Solange can hardly wipe her ass anymore, and she is taking agency by taking it away from Belinda, right? And like, that's dope. The issue to me is that so much of the rest of this film has been made to feel exaggerated and larger than life, that I feel like the strangling needed to feel the same way. That like it needed, but like the thing itself is fine, but I think it's very plainly shot. Belinda is very matter of fact about the whole thing, and I agree. And it needed fireworks.
And it's after if we're talking structurally, it's after the point where a climax should come. Structurally in the film, they have a kind of sort of confrontation with Solange in bed where they're like, you're not allowed to live with us anymore. And then she keeps screaming, why can't I die? Why can't I die? Which is funny, and then smash cut the next morning, she's dead. And then they start... Yeah, it's funny, but like in terms of like that's where like a climax in the film is supposed to go, it feels more like an anticlimax, because after that, then they go into sort of like resolving the film and going into the epilogue, and it's only then there at the very end that we get the very brief flashback where we have a shot of her standing over Solange, and she's going, why can't I die? Why can't I die? And she puts a pillow over her face and smothers her, and then the movie kind of ends. So when we're talking about like a traditional narrative structure, there is a void where the climax is supposed to be. The events that you're describing themselves can be made a climax, but I don't think the film does make that moment climactic. It does not feel like a climax.
My problem is that, like, if you took... two points on this. Sorry, I'll keep it as quick as I can. But, like, if you took, as it was shot, that the strangling and you put it back there, it wouldn't be enough. Either way. And
it still needs more. Me,
that's really the problem, is that just, like, the style of it needed more fireworks. Like, and the setup needed to come a little bit stronger.
And we need to feel like
failed attempts.
But,
again, that's
but to me, like, my point is really just that I am 100% okay with it being like a traditional and like non-formulaic to like the standard like beats of storytelling. I agree that that's where the climax would come, but to me, like, it being an anticlimax and then at the very end just getting this last bit of context.
But the film hasn't done anything otherwise in its runtime to subvert traditional structure.
We've talked about the failures of setup and payoff for like 45 minutes now. We were about to talk about Solange, and we got back into this conversation.
And Cleveland talked for like 10 minutes about what he liked about Solange's
introduction. And then we
introduction.
somehow got back into setup and payoff. Let's get back to
please.
Solange, because I think the actual elements of her performance are great, and the bits that she does are great. One of the great ones, for example, you mentioned speaking in tongues. We don't get a ton of scenes of speaking in tongues, but the ones we do are very funny. You know, one of the funniest bits in the movie is the one where, you know, they're arguing over the name of the child. They're at the dinner table, and Solange asks Belinda what they're going to name the kid, and she says Fern, and Solange is like, "What? Like a plant? That's not a name."
No, names used to have power.
Yeah, and then she puts her hand on Solange's belly, and starts speaking in tongues, and she keeps speaking in tongues.
Yes,
and then she just keeps going and going, and it almost feels like a "I think you should leave" bit because of the duration. It just won't end.
Yes.
And I was fucking losing it in the theater.
I think You Should Leave is great, like a great comparison. I think so much of this film is similar to I Think You Should Leave.
Yeah.
In terms of
its best moments are, I think that at a lot of times it fails to push that to that level, but that scene is very funny because it would be like chuckle worthy if it just lasted a few seconds, but the fact that she just goes on and on speaking in tongues like she's having like a conversation with the Lord or something in this nonsense language is really funny, especially only for them to settle on the fact that she thinks they should name the baby Laurie.
After her dead husband, Lawrence.
Yeah.
It's like this deep conversation with God speaking in tongues. And her final conclusion is, name it after your dead dad.
Yeah, Fern, that's a name that doesn't have any power, but Laurie, now that's a powerful name.
And somehow they agree to it. They're immediately like, "Oh yeah, let's do that."
That was the crazy part to me.
Oh yeah, that's the craziest part of all of it, is that they go along with it, and then later they're like mad at each other for naming the baby Laurie. It's like, y'all didn't have to do that.
Yeah, it feels like they just didn't care about their kid. Because like what you name your kid can be pretty important and special to you.
Yeah.
Like it's a very important part of like having a child, like deciding over your child's name.
And it's like, why humor this old racist woman who's going to be dead soon anyway?
And like, why did they pick
with the
Fern?
name of a child?
And like, for them to agree to it undermines like their choice for the name to begin with. Like, there's so many reasons why you would want to name your child Fern. Like yeah, it's like life. It's beautiful. Like they're going to be this young spring blossom that can become something.
I mean, I think Fern's a pretty bad name. It's pretty bad name to begin with.
Or like, oh, it's Fern because of like this book I read when I was a kid or something. Like there's reasons.
I don't disagree with Solange that Fern is a bad name, but also like all the characters in this movie kind of have kind of bad names. The husband's name is Norman.
Laurie is also a terrible
name. and they don't call him like Norm or anything.
Solange is a great name though. Yeah. Like it's such a mouthful of a name. Like it.
That's like an old Southern kind of name. Like it feels very appropriate. It feels.
Wasn't it like another term for a sunroom, a Solange?
That's a solarium.
Solarium. Okay, what is? I thought there is like a term that's.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I know Beyonce's sister is Solange.
Yeah. Well,
it's just Latin for soul. It means sun.
Okay. Cool.
I love how every time Solange gets worked up, she has kind of a very physical response to it. Whether it's, later in the movie she gets worked up and then just vomits like a yellow mustard like fluid.
Oh, people will be doing that.
I don't even think she gets worked up at that point. I think she just kind of like coughs and grabs a napkin and just like spits a mouthful of mustard and it acts like it's nothing. It's like she just folds it and puts it away.
She puts it in her purse.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, she puts it in her purse.
Dude, I swear to God, I have seen old people do shit like that.
Yeah,
like, growing up at like a church with a bunch of old people and stuff, like I swear to God, I have seen like old people like just do shit like that, where it's just like they just dribble into something and like put it away and like hope no one saw it.
Yeah, when you're old,
because guess what, you're old, you dribble a lot,
and your body's failing.
Yeah, like So yeah, no, I really no,
it's genuinely very funny.
It's hilarious. They really do get all of their mileage out of Solange's various bodily fluids throughout the movie.
And I can
ends up being the only real threat in the film.
Being a turnoff for a lot of people is all of the poop in this movie, the scatological humor.
It's gross. Yeah, it's part of the reason why it feels so much like a joke, because when you see the trailer and you go into this expecting like Hereditary, but you get like
poop grandma.
You get like Granny poops a lot is like the whole.
You get MESS mess.
Yeah, you get MESS mess. It's like man. Okay, so there's this moment early on in the movie that I feel like it really. We laughed at it like kind of just like a one-off joke, but I feel like it really ultimately set the tone for the rest of the film is when like they're moving Solange into like the front room. The movie's called The Front Room, the baby's nursery, and Belinda Ash is like, Solange, how are you feeling? And Solange just looks at her and she goes, pooped. And like it's a great delivery, it's very funny and we laugh, but then it's like the whole rest of the movie is just about her pooping all over the place. It's like, how are you feeling?
Well, and like the inciting event, you could argue, really in Solange's reign of terror is like at one point she is incontinent on a chair and she tells Belinda to keep it a secret.
Right. Yeah, she's embarrassed by her incontinence. Yeah.
And
natural.
At dinner later, Belinda reveals the incontinence thing. Because obviously once that starts, you're not going to close that box, really. Yeah. Like, she's going to continue.
Well, and he mentions the smell. He mentions that, like, there's a weird smell in the house, and Belinda's like, yeah, your mother, like, your stepmother shit all over the couch.
That's really what starts the war, right? Yeah. Like, Solange really goes on a reign of terror after, because it's not her being incontinent in a chair or something. She starts smearing shit all over walls and pictures and keepsakes and anything she can get her hands on, she can shit on.
Yeah, there's this one shot at one point in the movie where it's like the camera just kind of like slowly tracking through the house and like your kind of traditional horror thing, like where you'd normally be seeing like the aftermath of something horrible and like the blood smeared on the walls, and it's that same kind of shot, but it's just shit smeared on everything, like on all of the fucking picture frames, shitty handprints on the wall, like streaks across the floor. And it's just like, yeah, something horrible has happened here. The fucking diarrhea follies.
See, that is genuinely hilarious.
Oh, honestly. Yeah, that stuff is really funny.
The funniest part is it continues even after the baby is born.
Yeah.
And there's a point where Belinda has to clean a huge shitty mess, and she gets like shit on her clothes.
Yeah. And she has like shit like smeared on her neck.
Granny shit on her clothes. And later we see her still with the shit on her clothes, like nursing the baby. Like inches away is just like a load of shit on her shirt. She didn't even bother to change or
That's not good for the baby. Yeah, she's having to clean up baby shits and granny shits all at once.
Yeah, and I will say, I do like, there does feel like there is an ever so slight escalation of tension between the two after the baby is born.
Yes.
When,
Sure.
the baby is struggling to latch, and Solange gives Belinda the necklace, her fish necklace with the cross inside. We get that great scene where the baby is just refusing to stop crying until the fish is hung over.
Yeah, she holds the pendant over the baby and it stops crying, and she moves it away and it starts crying.
Like an on-off switch.
Yeah, because babies like jangling keys and shit. They like having little orbitals.
But specifically, it's that in the movie,
and it feels
intentionally.
It does feel like, oh, maybe there is something like supernatural. There's some magic happening or something, and it's like, yeah, I mean, adding the actual baby into the equation should elevate the tension if Solange feels dangerous, because then it's like, there's the baby in the house now. What if something bad happens to the baby? Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, it stops feeling like Solange is dangerous, because really all that we've seen her do is piss and shit everywhere. And it's like there's that little bit of escalation at the end where she bites the baby, but as soon as that happens, then the movie's over, basically.
There's another thing that we actually saw her biting the baby.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the aftermath.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, see, there's one more thing that sorry, but I'm going to do it again. I'm going to gripe again. On paper, I thought was a wonderful idea, but in execution, I hardly noticed. And that's that when she goes off to the hospital to have the baby, some time, transpires, and when she gets back, the entire house has been refurbished and remodeled by Solange. She's brought out so much of her stuff from storage and the like. And it's a great way to show, literally, that her house is not her own. That Belinda's house is not her own anymore. I love this idea. However, at the beginning, the house is a weird brown and yellow, and it's all your A24 kind of desaturated golden lighting, and then afterwards the house is brown and yellow, and there's a lot of kind of desaturated cold brown lighting, and
I don't think I would have noticed that the furniture was different if they hadn't said it.
You know what kills me too is because they have to literally flag it to make it apparent. And then I started looking for it. I was like, oh yeah, there is some more clutter in the house. But that's about it. It wasn't and I think this is an art direction issue where the house to beginning could have felt a lot more modern and cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that could have been much more apparent. But the problem is that the house has to match Belinda, and Belinda's personality is she's a scholar, and she's very invested in she gives lectures on the primeval mother, and culturally everything to do with the goddess. And so her home is already pretty warm, and then they just replace it with more warm furniture that's also ornate and lovely to look at. So it doesn't feel that shift doesn't feel as impactful as it does, because it's almost kind of hard to notice the difference between the two.
Yeah,
but I love the idea.
Yeah, well, I think for an example of it working, look at Mother, Aronofsky's Mother. That movie has similar ideas of your household being sieged upon by outside forces. And in that movie, the house absolutely transforms dramatically.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm going to defend Darren Aronofsky's Mother, but you are right about that. Yeah. It does. I think it does accomplish a lot of what this movie is trying to do thematically much better. Although I think this is probably more entertaining than Mother.
I disagree with that. They're both entertaining.
The Solange performance.
Yeah, because I do feel like the set designers put in a lot of work to change out all the furniture. To a point where you can barely tell.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's we haven't spent enough time in the house. We're not looking at the furniture. We're following the action of the characters and stuff. It's yeah, if you knew the house a little bit better, you might notice it. But yeah, there's not enough.
It's another setup payoff thing, isn't it? The house wasn't given enough personality to transfer. Yeah, all that noticeable.
Yeah. Do you want to rate?
Yeah.
And get into our prediction results.
Why can't I die?
Why can't I die? Why can't I die, indeed? This movie was shitty. Literally, 2.5 out of 5 for me. And 2 of those stars are devoted solely to Catherine Hunter's transcendent performance. She really does make the film watchable.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't need every movie I see to be high stakes, masterpiece, makes me think a lot. This feels like a great, late night with a few beers, with friends, heckling a movie type of movie. This feels like it could even be a sort of cult classic just for Catherine Hunter's performance. It certainly has lots of flaws. It's underbaked in a lot of senses, but that Catherine Hunter performance is so great. It's such a great physical performance. It's hilarious. I think it's worth it just for that. And I think it's a huge example of a great performance in a bad movie. Sure. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm gonna go for a similar score. I think when this movie is on, it's fantastic. I was laughing constantly once Catherine Hunter appeared. Yeah, really, Night of the Catherine Hunter. I enjoyed so much of that, and she's much of the movie. So for that, I'm gonna give it some plenty of praise. And in terms of the themes and the concepts, again, I'm a big fan of all of those, but ideas are cheap, execution's important, and I've talked about that enough. But what I will say is I think Ben really nailed it with the comparison to I Think You Should Leave. I Think You Should Leave does an amazing job of playing comedy out of awkward social faux pas, and often with, people acting childish. Like doing things that a 12-year-old would do, but instead they're adults in a format where it's just really not acceptable. And the awkward comedy that comes out of that, this does the same, but with race and with religion. And I love that, and I would love to see more films that do that and break those sorts of structural conventions, and play into this sort of like comedy horror more. With even the artsy A24 veneer. I love that too. But at the end of the day, you just having compelling protagonists that are consistent as characters is everything, and it didn't have that. So a 3. I think a 3 is good.
All right. Well, that will give The Front Rooms an average of 2.8 out of 5. Sam and Max Eggers, an underwhelming debut. Y'all are on notice. Meanwhile, I will be basking in the glow of Robert. We actually do have prediction results for this on the same episode because it came out last week and it is already gone from theaters in less than a week at the time of recording. So, Ben, why don't you give us our prediction results? I think this is going to be pretty far off from what I predicted.
All right, so I'll start with box office. I predicted 4 mil. Cleavview predicted 11 mil. TC predicted 6 mil. I did 1.6 mil.
Yeah. Oof. Honestly, that's surprisingly high, I think, for getting 1 week in the theater.
Yeah. For Rotten Tomatoes, Cleve, both you and I said 75, and TC said 78.
Jeez.
It's sitting at a 48.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's about right.
Yeah.
That's about right.
And collective rating, I said 3.5. Cleve, said 3. TC said 3.8.
Jesus.
So Cleve, you
got that one
as well. And then I thought Tease would like this one the most. Cleve, you thought you would like this one the most. And TCU said you would like this the most.
I liked it the least. Wild.
Yes. So, Cleve, you get that one as well. For comments, I said the year of nepotism continues. And in the parentheses, I said derogatory.
You were right.
Yes. Cleve, you said not a Robert movie. Also
Right.
correct. TC said, do the other brothers have the sauce?
No.
Or did this family put all their eggers in one basket?
Yes.
Robert.
All right. Well, next week will hopefully be much better because
Fuck yes, it will.
it's time for The Substance.
Oh, yeah.
Man, all of the preliminary reviews and stuff I've been seeing have got me very, very excited. I'm still trying to temper my expectations, but
Need to film on its own terms.
yeah, but man, it sure looks great. It's being received very well.
I'm fucking hyped.
I'm stoked as shit. Yeah, so join us next week for our review of The Substance, starring Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. Yeah, I guess that will do it for us this week. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening to this. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Stay tuned for some announcements on that front coming soon, probably. That's all I'll say right now. Shout out to our honorary pod boys, Sam, Zach, Micah, and Mitchell. Y'all are the best as always. Be like them. Become a Patreon supporter. And last but not least, you can head over to letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. Honestly, for my recommendation, I'm going to double down on a recommendation that I know I gave a few weeks ago, only because it's relevant. Joel Coen's The Tragedy of Macbeth from a couple of years ago. Catherine Hunter plays the three witches. The classic Macbeth witches, and she is very good. A very, very different performance from this movie, but no less screen stealing, no less physical, and overall, again, just a really good movie.
She does bubble, boil, and
Toil and Trouble, yeah.
in both movies, for sure. I'll say that.
For my recommendation, I want to, let's say on the theme of aging, but give a much more devastating look at it with a movie, Amour,
Just what we all need.
by Michelle Haneke. One of my favorite movies of the last 20 years.
More what?
Amour.
More what?
Amore.
What?
Bells will ring, ding-a-ling-a-ling. No, it's a devastating look at aging. It's about an elderly couple played by Jean-Louis Trintignant and Emmanuel Riva. The husband is going through dementia, and she's doing her best to take care of him in his old age, as she's also in her old age. Really beautiful movie. Made me bawl like a little baby. Big recommendation.
I'm going to recommend something totally opposite. I'm going to recommend Little Kitty, Big City. That game fucking rules. It's wholesome as fuck. It's got a little kitty in it, and you're in a big city, and you have to deal with the consequences of being a little kitty in a big city. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. I will say no more. Just look it up. I think it sells itself really well.
How are the litter box mechanics?
Oh, so good.
Hell yeah.
Much better than this movie.
Someone should have put
More effective.
someone should have given Solange a litter box.
Honestly.
All right. Well, folks, thank you for listening. I think it's time for us to all go change